I had just lost Delaney. It was that, let's see, we lost her in June, so it would have been turning more into the fall. And so it was one of those really cold days, like one of the first cold snaps that we got. And this baby, I was in Burlington and Kingsport, and this baby was in the cart in front of me, and the baby didn't have on socks and didn't have on a jacket and had on a little short sleeve onesie. And I thought, that baby is freezing.
Yeah.
And that mom was just completely oblivious. You know, she was just, it's just not a good situation. You could kind of tell. And golly, I'm like, I would give anything to have that child and be able to take care of that child. And I can't, you know?
So then you moved back to Tennessee.
Yep, we moved to Kingsport for my dad's job when I was halfway through my sophomore year of high school. So went from a little county school out in Hopkins County, Kentucky, to Dobbins-Bennett, and it was wow.
It's like culture shock.
Yeah,
for
big
sure.
time, big time. I came home from my first day and got in the car, and I looked at my mom and I said, I can't do it.
Yeah.
She was like, you can do it. It's going to be fine.
So did you cheer at Dobbins-Bennett
I did.
also?
Yeah, I did. And then cheered for a year in college.
At ETSU?
Kind of took a tour of
Okay.
colleges. Started at UT, and then I missed cheering, and so I actually cheered at Walter State for a year. And then finished up what I could do there, and came to ETSU. And then,
So what was your degree in?
Public relations, mass communications.
Okay.
So yeah.
What is that? Has that helped you any?
I'm not really.
Really?
Honestly, I mean, yes. I mean, communications. You know, it's great, and especially now with social media, we all kind of need to think from a PR standpoint about what you put out into the world. You know, but professionally, I mean, in a formal sense, no, I've never even.
Did you ever have like an actual professional corporate job?
So I
using it?
worked for Holston Valley Broadcasting for a little while,
Okay.
and then I just thought, I don't really love this. I want to go to beauty school. So I went to beauty school, and I was actually, when I had that job at the radio station, I wasn't finished with school yet. I lacked a semester. So when I went back to beauty school, not long after I finished up my degree, and then worked at a day spa in Kingsport for 13 years, and then recently opened up our own shop. Our first day there was last May 1st.
So what was, going through school and then starting over?
Yeah.
I mean, was that something that was challenging or just?
No,
was
it
easy?
was, so I'd say I had a quarter life crisis. So I had gotten married when I was young. I was 23 when I married the first time, and he was a great guy, still is a great guy. But we were just not, we were young and didn't have any business getting married.
Yeah.
So I kind of just scrapped everything at 23, 24, started over.
Yeah, that's kind of how we were. We were 20, 21.
Yeah.
And which has been really good.
Yeah.
But everything's changed.
Yeah.
You know, everything that we had planned
Right.
that I was going to do has changed.
Right. And I think, that's the thing, is like just that flexibility and allowing each other to grow and still stay together, and find, still keep finding each other and over. And we, weren't great at that.
Well, I always tell people the hardest thing is learning to live with each other. But it's kind of a joke towards the flexibility part. Like, to be married young, and that's, so there's two sides of this, right? Like, you want, like my kids, I hope that they grow up and they can kind of be able to explore and do things and travel. And but at the same time, if they meet somebody that they love,
you want them to have that happiness too. Yeah.
So being able to be flexible at a young age it's really hard.
Yeah, it is.
I mean, I think
especially
that's what it is.
When you're young, and at that point in my life, I had this distinct thought about who I would be and what my plan would be, and I wanted to be done having kids by 27. That was my big plan, and I wanted to have 3 kids. So I don't know, that math didn't really work, but that was what I thought I would do, and then I would just kind of go on, and then you grow and change, and you have a hard enough time giving yourself the grace to change, I think, when you're young.
Yeah.
But it's particularly difficult to allow somebody else that same grace too.
Yeah, see, that was like with us, we tried to have kids forever, and that was one of the biggest things with my wife. Me, not so much. Like, I was like, I can hold off for a few more years.
Right.
But from the very first time we met, she always wanted to be a mom.
Right.
That was her biggest thing in life.
Yeah.
And then we couldn't.
Yeah.
And so being married younger, not knowing really who you are, And then on top of that, fighting that, like, is it my fault? What is going on?
Navigating that challenge.
It was really, it was a very hard challenge.
Well, and I think that's a really, that's a time where a lot of people do lose each other, is when you're going through hard things to either, to have children. My husband and I experienced that. I met Alex, I was about to turn 30, and I had always said, if I'm still single and 30, then I'm moving. So I was like, then that's just maybe God's way of telling me, like, this isn't the place for me to be.
Yeah.
And so we went on our first date, like 3 or 4 days before my 30th birthday. So we met, and he was 39 at the time. So, and he had never been married, and our goals aligned. Everything just kind of clicked into place. Yeah. And so then we knew we wanted children, and so we started trying for kids pretty immediately within the first year, and then got pregnant really quickly with our oldest, Xander, and that was a great pregnancy. Everything was fine. And then we wanted to have our kids close together. We wanted 2, and really wanted them about 15 to 18 months apart. That was the plan. And so started trying again, had a little bit more trouble getting pregnant the second time, got pregnant, miscarried. They felt like it was just a fluke thing. And then went on again, still kind of struggled to get pregnant the second time. Each pregnancy was harder. So I can definitely see how when people go through that, and especially when there's not a cause for it. Thankfully, we knew the cause, but we got pregnant with a little boy. His name was Sullivan, and everything was great. We made it through the first 12 weeks. You think you're out of the woods. And then at 20, I was almost 21 weeks pregnant, and we just, I woke up and I just felt off, just something didn't feel right. So we went to the hospital later that afternoon, and I was in labor. And so they tried to stop it, but at that point there's not a ton they can do. So we lost him. I delivered him a couple of days later. And then they weren't really sure what happened. So they're like, well, we'll just monitor everything in the next pregnancy and try to prevent, if we can, if we see something kind of going south. And so that was a little girl. Her name was Delaney. And we were ultrasounding weekly. Everything was looking good until it wasn't. And so lost her at 20 weeks. Yeah. And so then went through a whole process, found, thankfully, God was good, even in the taking. I always say that, even in the taking, God is good. Because with her, we learned so much, and that's how we were able to get Zeke here. So we learned about, what my body was doing and how we could prevent it. So I found a specialist in Indiana. We flew up there, and I had a surgery and came back and got pregnant with Zeke, and everything was pretty smooth sailing. He came at 34 weeks, but.
Well, that's ours. Yeah, we came early. So with 4 miscarriages, is that right? 3. 3, okay. Mm-hmm. So how did that affect you mentally? And then you kept trying. I mean, like you were okay with more.
Yeah. So I've said often, Xander, I'm like, he was my emotional support child, and there were times that it was very dark. It was very hard. And if I wouldn't have had him, I often think about people who go through the things that we went through to have children, and I often think, how do they do it if they don't already have a child? Because that was. He was the focus through the storm. It was, I have to be here for him. I have to stay for him. I have to do everything I can to make myself whole again for him, because I don't want my loss and my grief to rob him of the life that he deserves.
Sure.
And honestly, it was just God. I mean, everything about it, when we figured out what was happening and why we had lost Sullivan and Delaney, the day that we had her, we told all the doctors, and the doctors have been with us through all of it, and my OB is actually one of my best friends. And so that day, everybody was like, we've learned so much. Now we know, and we can work things out differently, and it'll be fine. And we kept saying, no, he's gonna be an only child, because we felt like that was all we had left in us. And I another thing I learned was that in the moment that you need the strength, it's somehow always there. It wasn't there the day before, but the actual next morning, I woke up and I told Alex, I said, you're going to think I'm nuts, but we have to try again. And he was like, I feel the same exact way. You know, not even 24 hours earlier, we were saying, there's no way we're not doing this again. And I just really felt, we both felt strongly that God was going to make a path. And so I joined some Facebook support groups and learned about the condition that I have. And it was like all these signs kept pointing straight to having this one particular procedure done. So the condition I have is incompetent cervix. And so basically my body just goes into labor way sooner than it's supposed to. And I did not have that with Xander. And so that makes it really rare. So it's like 1% of women have it. And then 1% of those women have had a healthy pregnancy previously. And so this doctor that it was just, so I joined the Facebook groups on December 29th. I think this is just a testament to how fast God works when it's time. So we lost Delaney in June and we waited. They suggested 6 months to wait and start trying. Well, the first month that I wasn't pregnant and I was so relieved was when I realized that I don't feel good about our plan. Like I needed to get a new plan. So I joined these Facebook groups on December 29th and I reached out to the doctor's office in Indiana and I had a phone consultation somewhere like January 4th or 5th. Because in those few days from the 29th on, it was just so apparent that this was what I needed to do. I mean, that like this particular procedure, this particular doctor, I didn't know anything about that. I thought, I mean, he's in Indiana. Will he even see somebody from out of state? How do you even navigate going and having a surgery out of state where you have to fly? And but I had a consultation with him, just really just conversation over the phone. I'd sent my medical records, and he said, I think you'd be a great candidate for it. I believe it'll work. And I was like, okay, well, what do we do? And he said, well, we'll call you and we'll try to get something scheduled. We'll have to do insurance approval and everything, which that was a whole ordeal. It got approved, kind of got pushed through at the very last second. And they scheduled my surgery. And so I had my surgery February 4th. We got pregnant.
December 28th was your...
December 29th was when I joined the Facebook groups. Had my surgery February 4th. Flew back home on the 5th. Got pregnant in May. And then delivered Zeke. My C-section ended up came early, but it was December 29th. It's his birthday.
Wow.
So from the day I joined the Facebook groups, exactly 1 year later, I had a baby in my arms. Yeah.
That is. So do you think that, was there... No, this might be too personal.
No, it's fine.
Was there disagreements like in the marriage, like during all this?
So we not really disagreements because my husband is he's very calm and he's very, very much.
See, I'm not.
He's logical. He's very analytical. He deals in facts. That's what he always says. I deal in facts. And so I think God worked that out because my heart will lead me straight off a cliff.
Yeah.
When I was growing up, my dad would say, Lindsey, you can follow your heart, but you need to take your brain with you. And so I can be much more emotional. Now, going through everything that we went through really did change the way that I look at problems, I think, in the way that I approach things.
Yeah. Because
sometimes your heart will get you into some sticky situations and some things that you can't really overcome sometimes.
But see, finding all that, like with our kids, is we were the same way. With our kids, is that we were going through and trying for years and couldn't, and it caused kind of like a riff in our marriage a little bit.
And like I said, it's easy to lose each other. I think especially as women, I think men are a lot more laid back. I think about just kids in general, like especially on the timeline of having kids, and the biological clock is very different for a woman than it is for a man. Sure. So we feel a different sense of pressure, I think, in timing things. And we feel I know I felt a different sense of responsibility for the losses, even though I know in my head there's nothing I could have done to prevent it. We feel like the condition was probably brought on by the way things unfolded with my labor and delivery with Xander.
Yeah.
And so there was nothing I could have done to change it. And we were doing everything that we could. I mean, we were going above and beyond even what standard precautions are for pregnancies after loss, and had wonderful and supportive doctors. I think that's another key piece of it was that if my doctor had not been one of my best friends, I don't know that I could have kept going. And I don't know that I could have fought to find the solutions that we found if I didn't know that I had her backing me. She said to me one day, if we need to go to the moon to have another baby, then that's what we'll do. And a lot of people don't have that support either, you know. So it's also really easy for me to become super focused on something and throw caution to the wind and kind of let everything else go. And I think having Xander, that he was kind of always the grounding piece that brought us back together, you know, trying to work together and in tandem to keep him happy and growing and developing and learning. There were times, and I did have to think, Alex said to me one day, he said, it's scary for me, he said, because like when you're getting ready, you know, to like with Delaney, they tried to do an emergency surgery and try to save the pregnancy and it didn't work. But he said, you go into the operating room and you're only thinking about her. He said, when you go into the operating room, I'm thinking about her and I'm thinking about you. And he said, you know, that's just a really tough position for me to be in. And I hadn't really considered it from that perspective. So one of the things that we did promise each other was that we would do therapy. And that started after we lost Sullivan, because we both realized that this is something where the darkness can consume you. And so we had to, as he said, he wrote a really beautiful Facebook post after we lost Sullivan. And he said, you know, you can hover over the darkness. You can dip down into it for a little while, but you can't stay there. Yeah. And so I think our commitment to trying to become whole again, as whole as you can after something like that, that kept us coming back to each other. And there were times that it was really hard. There were times that it was really hard for me, especially I think it got the hardest when I was pregnant again with Zeke after those losses, because I did know that that was it. If that was not a successful pregnancy that brought home a child, I really couldn't go into it for another time. And the surgery that I'd had, that was statistically, it was the most likely success. So we knew that if that didn't work, if that failed, we really weren't left with a lot of other options. Yeah. To have our own, you know, biological child, or not use a surrogate.
It's almost like God knew exactly what he was doing with every step.
Every step.
But your husband, Alex, he was right on that. A lot of times that darkness gets us into a place where we anchor ourselves in it.
Yes.
Because for a long time it feels better.
Yeah.
Than trying to push through.
Yeah.
You know, and so that's kind of with this whole deal that we're doing even here, is that so many people are just stuck in those like dark crevices, and they're really not that big. Like, you know, the dark areas in our lives are very, like when you actually look at
the whole skin, it's very little.
But it's very easy to just anchor ourselves there.
Yeah.
You know, and I remember we were going through all of our struggles, and my wife was kind of the same way. She even though it had nothing to do with her, she blamed herself.
As women, as mothers who are born to nurture, you feel like you almost feel like it's irresponsible to place blame somewhere else.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, and so now you've got two healthy boys.
Two healthy boys.
And so Wild, I assume.
Yes.
If they're boys.
Yes.
Where did that lead you? Like, I mean.
So I think that, it certainly changed me completely. It changed my perspective on life. I read a quote once, and it talked about people who've experienced great pain or grief often lose their capacity for small talk. And I think that that's, in a lot of ways, that's very true, because you become hyper-focused on what actually matters.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of the things that we spend our time and our energy worrying about on the daily basis, they don't matter.
I see that. And it's even like with our organization here, there's been many a times where other groups want to have meetings. Mm-hmm. Let's have a meeting about everything. I tell him all the time, I cannot stand meetings.
No, gosh,
because let's just have a phone call, talk about it, and get on with it.
Well, that's me. I'm like, don't talk about it, be about it.
Yeah.
Let's go.
I mean, what do we need to do? Let's do it.
Yeah.
You know,
let's get a plan. Let's take our brains with us, but let's do it.
So do you think that moment in your life, going through all that, is really what's led you to be who you are
Oh, absolutely.
Now, so it's changed everything for
absolutely. You. Absolutely. I have always been a determined person, sometimes to a fault, but that it just completely shifted my perspective. Number one, on what's important. Number two, it made me, I learned so much more the value of community, because there were people that I was able to have conversations with during that time that gave me strength to keep going, that gave me hope. That was actually what drove me to seek out those Facebook groups that my doctor had recommended them, because I said, do you know of someone who's like me and has overcome this? And I think it's so true when the Bible tells us we'll be made overcomers by the power of our testimony. Sometimes we will also help other people,
Sure.
in that darkness, when you can see a light that looks similar to where you want to be, it gives you that staying power to keep on going. So I think that it reinforced that value of community and of sharing things with other people, because there were conversations that I distinctly remember that I will remember forever, just because of what they meant to me and the value that they brought at that moment in time. And I think if those people wouldn't have been willing to step out of their comfort zone, or send a meal or send a text or make a phone call, it would have been harder for me.
So it sounds like in your dark time, like support was,
for sure.
The biggest push.
Yeah. And with something, I think one of the things that we've seen through doing hurricane relief is people saying, no, I'm good. But you also have to be honest with yourself about, are you good? And are you good enough to survive today? Where's our target, right? Like, if our target is to be made whole, if our target is to rebuild our homes or to have another baby or to get a new job, you really have to look at your perspective of, I'm good, in relation to that.
Yeah.
Like, you might be good for today and you might see need all around you that you feel is greater than yours. But you have to think about where you're headed in the long run, I think.
Were you Christian? Like, I assume you were prior to.
Yes.
But would you say that you were more so because of this testimony after, or did it change things?
It did. It changed things. It really, I think the biggest thing is I realized that God does know the end from the beginning.
Yeah.
And so he knew that was something I was going to experience from the time that I was a little girl. And I recall, I always felt like I would have trouble having children.
Really?
I felt like I would have trouble getting pregnant, because women in my family, there has been some struggles with that. And they've had to kind of seek out different means to grow their families, right? So I thought that I would have trouble getting pregnant. I did not think that the problem would be in staying pregnant. But I always felt in my heart that there would be, that wasn't going to be easy for me. And the people that God brought into my life, even as a child, the church that we were part of in Western Kentucky, there was a family there, and they had lost a daughter. Her name was Hope. And they lost her pretty far along during pregnancy. And out of that came this amazing crisis pregnancy center that they created called the Door of Hope. And we would do all kinds of service projects and things like that in conjunction with Door of Hope when I was a kid. And one of the first people that I reached out to after we lost Sullivan was Gwen, and that's Hope's mom. And she was such a huge help for me.
Wow.
In all of that. So I felt like God really was writing that story all along. The people that I already had in my life, the people that I already had that I could reach out to comfortably, they were already there.
So, but see, with that, like, there's even the other side of the Christian spectrum, right? Like, where people would say, well, I mean, if God's so good, why would he set you up for failure?
Yeah, and that's really hard. That's a hard piece, especially when you see other people that they have children so easily. I mean, I'm sure you all experienced that. There was a lady in Burlington one day, and it's just not a good situation. You could kind of tell. And I'm like, I would give anything to have that child and be able to take care of that child. And I can't, The thing that I learned through it, though, too, is that God is a big God, and he's not afraid of us. and he's not afraid of our emotions, and he's not afraid of our anger. And when we think about the fact that like we have earthly fathers that we can speak frankly to, you know, that we can tell them when we're mad.
Sure.
We can express our emotions and our rage and our fears. And we can do that with our Heavenly Father too. We're not going to offend him. He's not going to run away from us.
Yeah.
And so I think getting really honest and raw with God in those times and questioning it. Our questions aren't going to hurt his feelings either. You know, how? Why me? Why not some of these other people that can just have 7 and 8 and 10 kids and they're all born addicted to drugs and they all struggle and they all, you know, like why, how is it so easy for them and it's so hard for us? And I, you know, one of the things that Gwen said was, when you lose a baby, you have to take comfort in the fact that that is God's plan. And if we see the reason for God's plan on this side of heaven, then we're going to be eternally blessed to know it. She's like, but even if we don't ever learn it, we don't ever know it, we still just have to trust that that was God's plan. You know, and you know, she said she remembered being the cemetery when they lost hope and seeing that dirt go into that grave. And she said, and out of that shovel full of dirt came so many beautiful things. So if God can take that and use that, then he can use anything.
So, I mean, just in retrospect, I don't know if I could have that sentiment.
It's a choice, I think, you know, and there's days that I didn't choose it.
Yeah.
You know, there's days that you just lay and wallow in it, you know, that you don't, and again, that's dipping into the darkness and not letting it consume you.
Yeah.
It's very easy to let it consume you. I think the other thing for me is with my faith, when I was trusting in God, it felt almost like a cop-out. You know, like it seemed easy to say, well, God's got a plan. And so I can't tell you how many times I laid that burden down the cross and picked it right back up the next day, you know, because you want to carry it around. Because when you're carrying it around, you feel like you're doing something about it, you know, but having that faith in his plan, it's a choice, and, you know, die daily, right? And so there's days that you can't trust it.
Do you think that's what, so now you're a business owner, do you think that's what pushed you into that?
So my first business that I started was a Christmas decorating business, and it definitely directly I started that because of the losses. So after we lost Sullivan, I didn't do any Christmas decorating. I love Christmas. And I remembered we were moving. We lost him in October. It was too close, too raw, too sad. But then Christmas came around and I thought, well, this is lame. Like, I don't even have a Christmas tree up. Like, that made me sad. And I remember thinking, it'd be great if I could just hire somebody to come out and just do this for me. And that kind of service didn't really exist. So that was directly born out of something that happened during that season of life. And then the thing, though, that I have been reminded of over and over again is there's always another way. You know, like there's always another way to have a baby. There's always another way to, you know, make money, start a business, do something different. And so but it also gave me that driving force. Like, you kind of tap into that strength and you go, okay, we'll land on our feet. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think one thing with like me, everybody's like, you've always got so much going on, or you know, you've got all these different little businesses and stuff. A lot of it too is like, it's because I can't stop.
Yeah.
You know, you don't, sometimes it just, struggles always, you know, I didn't necessarily have all these deep, dark struggles, but it was just something I can't not try something new.
Right.
And so my wife says it's a problem. I've got something wrong with me.
I've been told that before.
But I think some people just have that naturally. I think some people have something happen to them that pulls that out of them.
Yeah.
And I think some people just do it. But I do think that struggle, it does kind of give you like this grounding.
Yeah.
Like, this is nothing compared to
Exactly.
That.
And I always say, I'm like, you know, I lost babies, but I still think one of the hardest things I ever did in my life was move when I was 15 years old to a new high school. You know, talk about that.
Over.
Like, because just socially you're so vulnerable at that time. So you kind of think back, you know, I find myself thinking back on these kind of peak difficult experiences, right? And then you go, okay, I always say everything's figure outable. So when you've been to the mountaintop, right, of like difficult stuff, then I go, I'm not going to get my feathers ruffled about silly things.
So like the last guy that we had on, his deal was he got pregnant when he was a freshman in high school. It was him and his girlfriend. He got married. He dropped out of high school. But his football coach when he was a freshman had a picture on the wall, and it said, it was something like, 7 pounds can change your life forever. Yeah. But he was like, and it was a guy holding a baby, a football player holding a baby. It's like 7 pounds can change your life forever. But then, I guess his coach told him never to quit. Now, this was a freshman in high school that had a baby, dropped out, and told him never to quit. And then he's talking about now when he's 50, and he just became a cop at 50-year-old. And he says that is the one thing that stuck with him. So it's almost something that you always find, this grounding force is something that one time you had an issue and it sticks with you, and that's what changes your life forever. Yeah. A lot of times we always think not doing something is the better option. Right. But oftentimes you don't understand what doing just one thing will change somebody for the rest of their life. Yeah. And pull them out of that darkness, pull them that anchor off their feet.
Well, and just that, like I said, just forward motion. Yeah. Sometimes you don't know where you're going, you can't see the step in front of you, but you got to do something. So just sitting in it, that's not changing anything, So
where did so you went to beauty school. So that's where the hair salon come from. How did all that come up?
So my business partner and I, we had worked together at the last place where we were almost 10 years. I had been there almost 13 years, and then she came a couple years after me. And that was just another God thing. We had never, either one of us ever contemplated leaving, doing anything else. I'd wanted a salon of my own, but that was before I landed at the place where I was. And I thought, I always said it, I'll never leave this place. This is great. And then it just really went from a hypothetical conversation one night about, hey, would that be something we could do? Just looking at where we wanted our lives to be. She wanted to have another baby, and she's pregnant now. She's just a few weeks along. So, so our plan's working out. It's going great. But she had helped me greatly and she protected my business for me while I was in and out with maternity leaves and recoveries and things like that. And I wanted to be able to do that for her, but I've also got 2 small children. So how can I make that work? And we just needed more time, more flexibility to be able to create schedules for ourselves. And so it was just another one of those, I always say, like, God moves fast when he moves. And we went and looked at a place, we signed the lease, and 15 days later, we saw our first customer.
Do you regret it?
Not at all.
Ever?
No, not at all. It's been great. It's been wonderful. We're coming up on a year. It's been wonderful. We had 2 other great friends that we said too, our intention was it was just going to be the 2 of us. So we've got a little shop downtown in Kingsport, and we had no intentions of, we certainly weren't going to pull anybody else over, but we said if there were 2 people that we wanted to come with us that we would ever see ourselves working with, it would be these 2 girls, Laura and Amanda, and they're sisters. And so we kind of got things up and running, kind of got our path cleared to open the business. And they were like, hey, would you ever consider it if we were interested in coming? And so we're like, well, yeah, of course. And so they came a couple weeks after we opened. And so we were all there by June, and it's been great.
So it just worked.
It's just worked. It's just been meant to be. And I hope that they would say, but I know Madison and I both feel that it's just been a really great move for us. It's lessened our stress level. It's given us the flexibility. We're all moms. And so we all love our jobs, but it's not our primary thing,
So it's the freedom.
The freedom. It's given us the freedom and the flexibility to be moms first. And, at a ribbon cutting, I said, our jobs are important, but they're not the most important. Sure. And they never will be the most important. The most important thing is my kids, and tending to them while I have them at home. And that's how they all feel too. So we just all have a very similar focus for where we want things to be in our lives, where we place our career in level of importance. And it's been a really great year.
This wasn't really that long ago.
No.
This was just a year ago.
Yeah.
Almost, not even a year.
May 1st we saw our first customer, May 1st. Yeah.
So then we had the flood, which
then
is
we had the flood.
half a year ago almost now.
It's crazy. Yeah. So that, and Madison, my business partner, I mean, she absolutely, the flood happened the first week. All I could do was look at pictures and cry. I mean, it was heartbreaking because it was so unexpected. And then you look at the people and the magnitude of the loss, and it was. And I think it was just so surreal that it happened here.
Yeah.
First of all, that's something that happens in other places, But as I've learned, and that's the thing that we always said about losing the babies, is these are things that happen to other people.
Not us.
Not us, not people like us, not people that try to do the right thing and they try to make good decisions and they try. Same thing with the flood and the hurricane. This doesn't happen here. This happens other places, But it definitely happened here.
So have you ever prior to have you ever been in that area, like where the hurricane hit in East Tennessee? So you knew about it.
So I knew about it and was familiar with it, and Western North Carolina, familiar with that area. Of course, Asheville, spent a lot of time over there through the years, and have friends that are from these little places. A lot of them don't live there currently or didn't during the storm, but have some ties in and some buy-in to some of these little places. And it's when the mission field comes to your backyard, it's hard to ignore it.
Yeah,
it's kind of how we felt. I mean, I'm not equipped to deal with a hurricane or flood relief. I don't think any of us that were doing it or still are doing it were. I mean, I was a hairdresser. I kept kind of looking at God and going, "Are you sure?" I do hair, and they don't need haircuts. But it was just, again, that just one foot in front of the other. And I have some friends who are influencers that are local, and they started up a wish list on Amazon. And by the end of the first week, they were exhausted because of the amount of stuff that was being sent from all over the country. Yeah. They all three got together and shared it amongst their followers, the same list. So it was getting really good traction. And so there would be several hundred packages a day show up. They were just running this out of their houses. So they kept switching the address back and forth just to try to offload some of the work. And so at the end of the first week, they were like, "We're ready to turn it over. This is too much. It's too hard." And that happened to be fall break for my kids. And we'd not had anything planned. We didn't have any trips planned. And so my friend Lacey, who's one of the influencers, she and I asked the other two girls, like, "Hey, can we switch it to my house and let's keep it for another week?" Because we both felt really strongly that the needs were just changing too fast. And so the great thing about Amazon in this area was that we would have 1 day or 2 day shipping on most of these items.
And it could change that fast.
And it could change that fast, if not faster. There were days that we were going out and buying things local to try to get it out that day. But the turnaround time on the needs was so much faster local. If we needed, hats and gloves, we put that on the list. It could show up the next day and we could get it out by the next afternoon.
So I've never even really thought, I've been in this the entire time. I never thought about that.
Yeah.
So
shout out to Greg DePriest for putting our Amazon warehouse here because our 1 day and 2 day shipping is so good in this area. So it was the supply chain for most things around here wasn't really shaken on that, like for shipping, right? So we just felt like it was a great resource. And we thought, no, this is still, it's going so well. And then that was, sure enough, that was the week it turned cold. Yeah. Unexpectedly a little bit. We thought we had a couple more weeks, and then we had a 29-degree night in the second week, the end of the second week. And so then we started trying to have to shift to sleeping bags and coats and things like that. So we held on to the list, and the packages started coming to my house. So the first week, I felt like God was like screaming at me to get medical supplies. And again, that was when I was really going, okay, I do hair. I don't get medical supplies. I don't understand. And so I reached out to my cousin. She's a nurse. Her husband's a doctor. And I said, I just feel like, we're hearing of these field hospitals that are being set up and people are dealing with all kinds of stuff. All their medications have been washed away. Like, I don't know what I'm doing, but I just feel like I need to collect medical supplies. So she says, let me see what I can do. So this was on Thursday, and by Saturday morning, she and her husband had collected a truck full of medical supplies, like clinical medical things. And so we met them just on our side of Clinch Mountain, because they're from Tazewell, Tennessee. Okay. We met them down there, and those medical supplies, we got them home and inventoried them. There was stuff I had to Google. I didn't even know what it was. But I just really felt strongly that that's what we needed to do. And it's funny because Lee Colley, I had given my phone number out to one person, a lady in Greene County, and she connected me with Lee. And so Lee had called me up. We were just unloading those supplies into my house, hadn't even started to open them yet. And he was telling me about what they were doing, and they were going out and they were giving breathing treatments to people. They were just going to basically do welfare checks on older people, and he was carrying a little generator with him to do nebulizer treatments. And I said, well, why don't we add some of the USB-C chargeable nebulizers to the Amazon list, and then that way you can leave one with them. You know, they have their own there, and then they can recharge it with the solar battery banks, right? So he was like, yeah, that'd be great. And I said, but in the meantime, I said, I can get you one. I've got one, you know, that we bought for Zeke when we traveled, and we'd never even used it. And I said, you can take that, and I can try to see if I've got some neb kits left from, because he has asthma, so we've been in and out of the hospital with that. So I said, I probably have some, you know, unopened neb kits from the hospital, and see if we can at least get you set up, because he had left his generator with a lady and was trying to replace that. And I got off the phone with him, and my sister had walked in and with the first box, and she opened the first box, sitting at my dining room table. And the top half of this box was Bibles, and underneath the second half of the box was all neb kits.
It's unreal.
Yeah. I mean, and then that stuff just kept happening over and over again.
It does. I told Justice, our second in command here at 72, I told him it's almost like it's just too easy.
Yeah, like, it just kept. It was like, and it truly was. It was manna for the day.
Yeah,
that's all it was. It was just being open. Number one, to receiving what was going to come through your door, whatever that was. But number two, being open to ask.
Yeah.
You have not because you ask not. And then it was just in the nick of time, it'd be exactly what you needed.
It was almost always something somebody needed somewhere.
Yeah.
And so, like, the flood, do you feel, I tell some people sometimes, I don't know if the flood was necessarily always directed towards the people that it affected to change the law, or the people that were helping. Because I can feel that it's changed my perspective on everything. Definitely. I mean, that's the reason we started a nonprofit.
Yeah.
Our nonprofit is not flood. We're doing flood
right,
items, but it's forever.
Yeah, it was the catalyst for creation.
And so I feel like it's like God's kind of like planning people to do stuff. So you all started a organization, right, out of this.
Yeah, yeah. So, and that actually, Amber Kitchens and we had known of each other. Our kids went to the same preschool, but we weren't close friends or anything prior to this. And my friend, that's my OB. She said, this was in week 2 when my thing was, I've got all these supplies coming now. Now, where do they go?
Sure.
I mean, we put a piece of brown paper up on the wall in my hallway. It's still there. And we started writing down things that were happening, things we were praying for, and blessings that were kind of like, you know, coming and going. The top thing on the list for me of prayer requests was, where does all this stuff need to go? Because we've got a ton of stuff. And I had a moment when we were unpacking all those medical supplies and taking that inventory, and I said, what if nobody needs this stuff? What are we going to do? Yeah. You know, it wasn't in my house even 24 hours. It was all gone.
Yeah.
But through doing that and trying to make connections with people and see who needed what, Allison reached out and she said, you and Amber need to connect, because I think you guys will work great together, and you're doing some of the same kind of stuff, and you guys really need to meet. And so, again, we knew of each other, and so she came over and we just started working together, and our communication style is really similar. Our work ethic is really similar. Our drive's really similar. Our husbands just kind of go, yeah, okay, do what you need to do. And, you know, that we just clicked. Everything just fell into place. And so we would call and we laugh, because we're like, we get ourselves into situations where people like us really don't have like any business being. But I can talk, you know, I'll talk to a fence post. And if that's what it takes is calling and talking to somebody, then we'll try. That's the thing. I never made any promises, but I did always say, I will do everything that I can. I will try my hardest. Because you can't promise that I'm going to get you this random obscure
one-off
insulin
item
or whatever, whatever it was. But I'll try my hardest, and I'll ask everybody that all my resources. She had a lot of resources too, so it was just a naturally great relationship.
So what did y'all call the organization?
Well, so that's what so when we came up with our name, it was just the two of us. And so we would call, again, getting ourselves into situations where we didn't really have any business being, which I think was all of us in the beginning. And so I called the state of Kentucky one day and begged for 200 body bags. You don't have to include those in the podcast. But because I had heard through, I'm probably on some kind of crazy watch list now. But I'd heard through some of the people that were running supplies that was what was needed over like in Yancey County. I can't remember, and so they kept, the man with emergency services in Kentucky, he kept saying, now, ma'am, what organization are you part of? And I was like, I'm not one. And he's like, well, where are you running these supplies out of? And I was like, somebody's garage in Gray. I don't,
and you're requesting body bags.
Yeah, I'm like, I don't know. I heard we need 200. And he's like, I would think that we would know about that. And I'm like, I don't know. I'm just passing along the information. So yeah, we're always like, that's the joke. Like, you remember that time you called and begged the state of Kentucky for 200 body bags? But that was where our name came from, the Nobodies, because we would call places and people would say, well, who are you with? And we'd say, nobody. It's just me. I'm just an individual. And so then when we wanted to start Access, and once Bristol got their stuff up and running, United Way reached out to us. They had actually seen from some Facebook posts, Amber was doing a great job of populating every day all of the ways that people could help and who the points of contact were. And I mean, she would get up at like 3 and 4 in the morning and start compiling that list for the day. And so they had seen that making the rounds on social media and reached out and said, how can we help you? Their question was, number one, why are people reaching out to you guys and not us?
A large organization.
Yeah. And so it's just comfort. That's all it was. It was just people were more comfortable talking to people like you and I who weren't there in a formal capacity. Because Appalachians, we're odd bunch, and we're kind of standoffish with people that come in and they don't sound like us, they don't look like us, they don't live like us, and people were not very trusting. So when you have, especially I think Amber and I say that, like we come in and we are the least government-looking people ever, and so that has absolutely gotten us into conversations with people that a lot of folks haven't been able to have, because we don't look like FEMA. We don't look like, we're just moms, I
think there's a lot of distrust with larger organizations too.
Yeah.
It just seems like they're always looking for something.
There's always a payback in some
there's
sense.
Always something they're wanting out of the conversation.
Yeah.
And I have changed my viewpoint a little bit on some of these organizations because I've been there with them side by side. I do think there's issues.
Yeah, and I think for me, it was really aggravating. I think because, like we've talked about, like just being a person of action, it was really frustrating to watch such a slow start.
I think even now, so we're 5 months in, even now there's conversations like, why are we still not doing these things? Why is FEMA still not reacting the way that I would expect them to? And then I'm like, well, this is where God's placed these small organizations in the community.
Fill in the gaps.
And from the very beginning, we had, 2 weeks, for 2 weeks, I don't even think I left. I felt like I was there every single day working on something. Yeah. I mean, I'd get home at 10 o'clock at night, I'd be up at 6. Yeah. Back out. Right. And it was almost like you couldn't leave. Survivor's guilt's real. And I do
very
tell
real.
That.
I have said that too. Very real.
I'd lay at night thinking about what I was going to have to do tomorrow to help somebody else.
Well, and laying in bed, I remember in that second week, and my cousin, he and his wife live in Knoxville, and they're from Southeast Kentucky like us, and she lives in the area that right now is, a lot of that area is being heavily impacted by flooding. And so they knew, she in particular, the area where her family lived, she knew really intimately what it's like when everything gets washed away and you know your neighbors lost everything. And so she said, I want to come and help. And that was the second week after the flood. So she and her daughter, she's a little bit younger than Xander, they came and spent the whole week with us. And so we called her the head of house because I was a maniac. My phone rang off the hook.
Yeah.
I could not stop. Yeah. I mean, it would be 1 and 2 in the morning, and I would get the phone calls you guys probably experienced what we did, which was, you know, there's no cell phone service. Yeah. So the morning and the first part of the day were almost creepy calm. And then at about 3 o'clock, the phone would start ringing, and it would not stop ringing until about midnight.
Yeah.
If on a good day. Yeah. Because when people would kind of do their runs and everybody's trying to leave out early in the morning and they'd go out and then they wouldn't have cell phone signal and they'd, you know, run into these situations and hear of these needs and they come back in and start trying to, you know, find the stuff.
I tell people all the time too, you know, Facebook's one of those things I can't stand.
But it's been such a tool.
But it was the reason we were able to do
it was the lifeblood of all of this. Yeah.
Because like literally we could just simply put it on Facebook and then all of a sudden it was done.
Yeah.
But people had Wi-Fi still, but no cell service. Yeah. So
especially once the Starlink started going out.
Right. And then Verizon set up their stuff in the area. So this stuff, it changed my perspective. So I was never a prepper. Yeah. I'm still not. No. I'm not going to say I'm a prepper.
No, but then I did have one sleepless night in the first few weeks where I had all this on my mind and thinking, what will happen if something like this ever happens again? And I'm like, then I filled up my Amazon cart and it looked like I was going to start a bunker. You know,
and then now you're asking for body bags.
Yeah, exactly. And then I'm already on the government watch list, so I'm going to get no help if it actually does happen to us. But
what blew my mind was some of my property that I was working on as a rental house. It was I'm not kidding, 15 minutes.
Yeah.
So I took my family out, and I took my kids and my wife and my mom. We all went down and we just drove on all the bridges that were gone later that afternoon. We just drove through. It was like we heard this flooding's happening.
Yeah.
Let's just go look. It was on Friday, Friday morning. And so we drove around, and I go back and I'm painting and I'm doing all this. And all of a sudden my phone starts blowing up. It's like, hey, Jackson Bridge is gone and this bridge is gone. And it's like, it was gorgeous.
Yeah.
I mean, at the 15 minutes down the road, it was like nothing ever happened. And it was beautiful out, sun was shining, and then all of a sudden the bridges are gone, houses, people died. Yeah. I think that is what, that one moment changed the way that I reacted.
Yeah.
Not because I was in it, but because it was like, it looked like a bomb went off, and I was over here and I was just completely
Everything's fine.
Yeah, my kids was running around playing
And I think for those of us that felt that and saw it very early on too, I think that there's a difference in the impact, right? Yeah. Like, and there's still areas where it looks like day one.
Oh yeah.
You know, I mean, you can get into little pockets of it, but.
Well, they're still tearing down houses 5 months later.
Right. Yeah. You know, there's, we've been working some over in Spruce Pine area, and they only have one new construction over there. That's it. You cross the North Carolina state border and it's like a totally different world. Tennessee has made great strides. I think so much of that is due to ASP and just
it's the
locals and the knowledge that was already in place. I think for how to. It was a shift, obviously, to overcome in this particular instance, but there were already people and organizations in place that kind of knew how to navigate it.
They never had done a hurricane.
Right, but they knew how to build houses.
Handle disaster, fires and stuff. So they already plugged in.
Right, and so I think that impact, though, in the early part of things, and then I also say to him, like, everybody who's left standing right now is raging ADHD, and this has just become our hyperfixation.
Yeah. You're not wrong.
I mean, I'm like, and so that was the thing, is it was like I couldn't let it go. And so you're talking about, you lay down at night and you think, and I just remember one night thinking, man, in like 30, 40 miles, basically any direction from my house, there's destruction.
Yeah.
How can I not do something to help? And I get up and life continues as normal. You'd never know anything happened. We were without power for a few days because a tree fell across the street, but that's nothing. That's nothing. And actually, that's the only time in my life that I've not been annoyed to be without power, especially with young kids who love watching television.
True.
I was like, but I can't complain about not having power.
Yeah, but you got a house and everything.
Yeah,
else.
I've got a roof over my head.
And I think what's been wild to me too is past all that. So we started an organization. You started an organization. There's a bunch of us, and now we're kind of looking at like the whole big picture of how do we sustain and do all that stuff. Then you've got these groups, these small groups, these one-off guys. We've got one here with you today. Just these guys that just kind of come in from all over, and they're just here to help.
Yeah.
I mean, they're literally just one. I can't tell you how many times, like, so you go back to the Appalachian stuff. Some questions I get, it's like they're suspicious. Like, why are they here? What's their motive?
Right.
Like, I mean, they're sleeping in an Airbnb in
Right.
Johnson City, and they just got a shovel and a chainsaw, and they want to help.
They just loaded up and came.
And so there's this whole group of people. It's reinvigorated my faith in humanity.
Absolutely.
Is those people that I have these conversations with every single day. Now I'm like, this is the reason things actually get done.
Yeah.
When we have issues.
It's the average person.
It is.
And I remember it was right before it was the Saturday after the storm. Yeah. And that night in particular, I recall a conversation I had with Alex, and I was like I said, the first week all I did was watch, social media, and we didn't know a lot about what was happening because even our cell phone signal in Kingsport wasn't great with our power down and everything. So it was just bits and pieces that we were able to
and the people in the area
together.
Still didn't have it
either.
Yeah. So they weren't.
So it's still kind of a slow trickle of information in that first week. But I just was paralyzed. I didn't know what to do. And I think that was God kind of like resting me up for what was coming, and being able to take that on in the second week. But I remember saying, I just am so afraid, like the world has gotten so crazy and people have started to become, it seems like with every passing day, just society as a whole, we're more unkind to each other.
We are. Yeah.
And I remember that had just felt so heavy prior to the storm. And I said, I don't want, we love where we live and we live here for a reason, and we love our little protected, kind corner of the world. And most Appalachians will tell you we're totally fine with people not knowing that we're here. Like we're all full, that's kind of been the joke. It's like, no, East Tennessee's full. Yeah. But we protect this area because we love that way of life, because we love that slower pace, that sense of simplicity, that, the person that you go see at City Hall, or that you do this with or that with, whatever, like those connections, right? Yeah. And we're just generally very kind to each other. I feel like here, much more so than the rest of the world. And I said to Alex, I just am afraid that all of this has come to our area, our region, and it's going to change our culture. Mm-hmm. And I don't want this storm to have washed our culture, especially a culture of kindness, away. Yeah. And I was so afraid that people, this is Appalachian of me, that people from the outside would come in and they would change, and they would, change our people and make us feel jaded. And especially, I think, the response, there's no denying it. It's the response by FEMA has not been great. Yeah. And there's a lot of people that, that there could have been more done, right?
There should still be more.
Right. So there's a lot of people that could easily become jaded by that, right? But it's been the power of the ordinary person that just jumps in the car and comes. That, like you said, has changed how I view society as a whole completely.
My biggest thing has been that we have to have a unified front. Mm-hmm. And I've always said this, and so prior to this, I was always wrapped up in political, news and media and political ambitions and stuff of that nature, right? Like, I felt like that was the way to make a change. Right. Is like get involved and do things.
On a bigger,
high
level.
Get in your local government. And then I've realized, really, from the living room of your house, you have more ability. I've always said this, is if right now the loudest voice in the nation is the 1%. Uh-huh. If the 99% would stand up, you could change the entire world. Yeah. And so, like, in our community, mm-hmm. I do feel that the 99% has come up.
I do too.
Like, there was people that I would drive by every day. I was leaving my house and driving in. Mm-hmm. And then, like, I would drive by, and I feel now, I'm like, it was stupid of me to think that. But, like, I would drive by, like, a pastor or a lawn mowing service or an excavating service, a company that mm-hmm. I knew, and they're, like, going somewhere else to work on a house. I'm like, how are you not headed the same way? And then, like, you get down there and you've got groups out of Indiana that are literally just driving down with their excavator. For us, one of the biggest things in our organization that we say is kind of funny, mm-hmm. is there was a lady that was down in the area, and her husband died like the next week. after. So like they got out, he was on hospice. They got him out of the house. We got hooked up with her. She had a double wide that got washed off the foundation into the trees, but she had a loan on it. She couldn't do anything about it because removing securities off a loaned property is an issue.
Right.
So we paid her house off and tore it down with a group out of Indiana in the exact same day. So it was like, this is in real estate, I never in my life would have paid off a loan and tore the house down.
Yeah.
And so, it was kind of like, it's just movement.
Right.
We don't know how to do everything.
No. Well, and like I said, everything's figure outable.
Yeah.
I can Google it.
And we've always said what we want to do is just fill the gap.
Yeah.
Whatever gap there is, we just want to stand in that gap and bridge it until we can't do, we all can't do everything, but I guarantee there's somebody doing something. We need the churches, local churches, everyone, and they were doing it.
Yeah.
To stand up, fill those gaps.
Yeah.
Local organizations. We can't reinvent the wheel.
Right.
So, like, our organization isn't building houses simply because there's organizations that's building houses.
That do that and know how to do that.
So why would we take resources? And so that's kind of how we've been
together. Yeah. And I think that's another thing that on the East Tennessee side, that unified, like I feel like we're all kind of a little team over here. Yeah. And we all rely on each other and call and, hey, do you know so-and-so? Do you know so-and-so? Who's doing this? Who's got that? And we all kind of, I feel like, learned how to do it with the supplies early on, right? Now we're doing it on a much greater level where we're going, okay, so do you have a contact for this organization or, who's rebuilding houses or who's, drying things out? And
our biggest thing has been like to set up meetings. Like, none of us knew how to run a nonprofit.
Right.
None of us knew how to run an organization, a disaster organization. Right. I was very lucky in the very beginning to work with one that the state had brought in. And I got to work side by side with them and show them around and do stuff. And I learned a lot on how they organize and how they send groups out and that kind of stuff. But none of us knew how to network. Right. I knew how to network in business.
Right, in a regular sense, but not through
this is like totally different, right? And then on top of that, to vet the scamming organizations out, it's been unreal. I mean,
now that has been really hard for me.
It's irritating.
It is, and that's been really a frustrating thing. And Amber and I had a conversation about that. It's not been all that long ago, honestly. And it was another thing that we'd seen that had, we had kind of thought, we'd not worked with this particular, person or organization, but we kind of felt like they were doing some pretty good stuff, right? They were over on the North Carolina side. And, and then it came out that they were maybe not doing such good things. And she and I talked about it, and she said, I hate that I have to be so skeptical of people that appear to be doing good, and that was something that I think we were less prepared for here. I didn't know that there was more than one Cajun Navy. I didn't know that the Cajun Navy was a formal thing. Yeah. I thought it was some Cajun guy in a John boat that hopped out and, wanted to help in Katrina. I didn't realize that these had organized into these massive formal 501c3s that have been operating since, 20 whatever. But you don't, there's a hustle culture within the storm community.
I tell people all the time, there must be good money in it.
There's got to be.
I mean, because I can't find it.
And I've often said, I'm like, now there are a lot of wonderful people that come and show up.
Yeah.
But the flip side of that too is that you do kind of have to be skeptical of people, because you're like, okay, so how can you pick up and uproot your life,
and
just move
across
to
country.
somewhere, and so and I have found that there are people that can do that, and it's fine. A lot of them are veterans. That they've already lived one life and had one whole entire career. And
they're still, I do think that's something we probably do need to hit on, is because the mass majority of those kind of like one-off people all the time, they are retired veterans.
Yeah.
And they're young. I mean, because, 20-year career is, they're done.
You can have a whole second, a 2.0.
And they literally just pack up, they come here, they know how to thrive.
They speak each other's language.
Yeah.
That was the greatest thing that I saw. That was the coolest thing to think to be a part of, is to watch veterans who have not previously, they didn't know each other. They didn't, maybe even completely different branches of service, but they immediately come together and they mobilize so quickly.
Yeah.
So whereas we're all over here just feeling like twiddling our thumbs, the people that I'm mobilized the fastest with were my friends that are like-minded, like me, like Amber, you know, like just the doers, people of action, and my family. Because we all decided very early on, you know, in my family, we've always operated that please and thank you are implied sometimes, you know, and so we mobilized really quickly. But that was just based on those personal things, you know, those were people I knew, you know, and you know, if you have a bad day with them, they're still going to be standing there at the end of the day. But like total strangers that come together and can get stuff done so quickly and can organize so fast. And they just, I mean, it's been wild to see. It's been the coolest thing. But yeah, I didn't have that level of understanding that a lot of those one-off people would be like that.
Well, and they're so, and these guys that I get to work with every day and talk to, they're task oriented. They get stuff done and then they go home.
Yeah,
it's like their whole life is revolving around helping people.
Yeah,
and it's kind of it throws you off guard just a little bit because you're like, what's the because
what are you getting out of this?
Like I said, my mind was always like this political game.
Right. Like what are you in it for?
Like really, there's got to be some other underlying deal that you're doing here.
Right.
And then the flood has shown me that they're legitimate. Like I said,
yeah, for sure.
It changed my focus on humanity because there are just good people.
Yeah.
That have no real ambition.
Absolutely.
They just want to help.
Absolutely. The other thing that it's taught me is, you know, going back to like biblical principles, like he'll leave the 99 for the one, right? So if you give out 99, if you give out 100 buddy heaters and 99 of them go to people that sell them on Facebook Marketplace, but one person stays warm. Right.
Well, and see, it goes back to what I was telling you about, like the last guest, where that one guy told him something good, you know, 40 years ago.
You never know what that's going to turn into, what seed that planted.
You just planted a seed that changed that whole person. Now, the next person that needs help, they're going to help.
Right. So if you, again, that's that trickle down effect. And so, and you know, the other thing that's really hard, talking about heaters is because that was such a big thing in the beginning, was like, it was so hot at first. Like, and one of the things that we've laughed about is like thinking back now, like the Yellow Jackets.
Yeah.
They were everywhere.
They were eating people alive.
They were literally, I mean, you could not find an EpiPen for hundreds of miles around here. Benadryl sold out. I mean, that was what was wild, is it was so hot, right? And then it snapped, and it was so cold. And so trying to get buddy heaters was like pulling teeth, right?
Yeah.
Like we were driving all over East Tennessee trying to get them, and then trying to get the money to buy them, and try, you know, and they were coming in on Amazon, but even that was like, you know, it wasn't that time of year yet.
Yeah.
Right? So then we gathered up all these buddy heaters, and then so you work, it's like pulling teeth. And then you drop them all off in 10 minutes.
Yeah.
And it feels very anticlimactic, I think. You know, like, because you think, and then, so that taught me, number one, it's not about me. It doesn't matter. Like, they're not going to, you know, do a dance number when I bring them a buddy heater, calm down. But the other thing about that is that you can't steward past the give.
Right.
So you can't stand there and dole out and make sure and ask them, you know, well, how many people live in your house? How many rooms do you have? Do you really need 2 buddy heaters?
No,
because
that's not my job.
Right. Like it doesn't matter how hard it was for you to get it.
Yeah.
You have to give it generously and graciously, and you can't steward past the give.
That's exactly right. And I did figure out there's like limits to, like, you know, you see all this stuff of, you know, do you have the USDA, like the food banks do the USDA stuff? Do you have that? Where's your card? Like, I don't care.
Right.
If you tell me, if you come up to me right now and you say you need something, we're going to fill you.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just the way. That's just the way we're operating.
Well, and we have to choose. It's almost like it makes you feel. The world wants to tell us that it's stupid and it's wrong to be naive.
Yeah, and it's wrong to be nice.
Yeah.
I mean, let's just.
Yeah, absolutely.
They don't want you to do
like
this.
You need to be skeptical.
Yeah.
You need them to prove that you need to see their driver's license to see that they were living in a flood affected area. You can't get this help if you don't live in this county that was declared an emergency situation. You can't. No, that is not, as believers, that's not what we're called to do.
Yeah.
We're called to give generously, do justly, love mercy. You know, like we are to be generous with all that we have been given and trust that He owns the cattle on 1,000 hills.
Right.
And He can replenish everything we've given out in no time.
We've got a warehouse, our organization, at 14,000 square feet. I bet we've emptied that warehouse 4 times. And every single time I go in there, I'm like, I don't even know how to get rid of half the stuff we've got.
Yeah.
Is like we sent out 4 basically semi-trucks to Kentucky, and it don't look like we sent anything.
Yeah, drop in the bucket.
The stuff's going to be there. Supply, God is manna. God is going to fill it. He's going to multiply the bread.
Yeah.
And so our deal is just to steward that into a place where it can be used to unify and to drive change.
Yeah.
And I do feel like we're doing that as a community, but as organizations that I hope there's some that are going to be here for a long time.
Yeah.
Churches.
Yeah.
Our organization, we've always said what we want to do is why are people driving by 14 churches to
Having
get
to
to
come
us?
To a warehouse.
Right? Why are they doing that? How do we get those churches back to be the forefront of the communities, to be the ones that are serving, and because that is our call as Christians. Right. And if you're sitting in a pew on Sunday and you're not out there actively doing this, and I don't know of any of them, but I knew there was a guy in the very beginning. He says, if your pastor, if your community has a church and your pastor is not out serving that community, you've got an employee.
Yeah.
You don't have a pastor, right?
Right.
Like you pay a salary,
right,
and for them to do that. And every single one of us is called to do something. Now, not every single one of us are going to be out here mucking and building houses, but inaction is a sin.
Yeah.
It is.
Well, and it's like we talked about earlier, like the not choosing is a choice.
It is. It goes back to the kids.
Right.
The deal. What made us sick in those moments in the darkness is there are people out here that have 7 kids just to get a government paycheck.
Right.
We struggled to anything, and then we fostered our kids. We went through the state, we kind of like you. It was so fast. We went through the foster stuff to be able to have kids. Come May, we've never had a placement. We get an email say, hey, we've got 2 kids that's up for adoption. Do you want them? And then September, they were our kids.
Yeah.
Like it happened that fast.
Yeah, it's wild.
So.
And it's just, it's wild how, and the positioning of other people and other circumstances, right? So that way when, it's almost like, to use a really bad analogy, given everything we've all just gone through here, but like when a dam breaks.
Yeah.
And that water comes rushing, it's fast, right?
Yeah.
Like when every piece and every player is positioned just right and it breaks loose, everything is, it can happen so quickly.
Yeah.
Going back to the church piece is a lot of the churches, there's been a lot that I've been disappointed in. I mean, I'm just gonna be honest. But then I hope that it's probably changed the way that people look at their facilities and their insurance policies.
Yeah.
And, because I know that was a big thing for a lot of people. Did you guys find that it was like, they're saying, well, we can only have a hub open for so long because our insurance doesn't want us to do this or doesn't want us to do that, or
no,
we can't have a Connex, or we can't have,
we could have, somebody could have come in here and sued us. I mean,
yeah,
we were just acting. I mean, we didn't know what to do. We just knew we had to do something. We just done it.
Yeah,
we'll figure it out.
Yeah, and that's the thing too. Is it's like and I've always kind of been a little bit more of a let's act and beg for forgiveness kind of person, especially when it comes to there's a need. How can you just? I'm not the person who's hungry or cold doesn't care what my insurance policy says or whatever.
Well, and that's kind of the deal. Is I do see that, especially now having a legitimate organization.
You got to be careful. You got to protect yourself.
I do see that. But at the same time, it's like I'm not going to have inaction because I'm waiting on my insurance company to send me a piece of paper. Right. We're going to figure out how to help. We're going to there's resources there, so let's plug them in. Like if you could say one thing, like to anybody that's been through this or going through this, if you could do one single thing, and I want to say that to people that are doing it, and then I'll ask you another one.
Okay.
But to people that are going through the homelessness, the sleeping in a camper, lost everything, what is something that you'd want them to know?
You're not alone.
You're not a nobody.
You're not a nobody.
Yeah.
You matter. You're not forgotten. It might take us a minute, but we're still here.
Yeah.
And I think that's because. So the other piece, I joked that like everybody who's still working in this has got raging ADHD. But I also think that everybody who is still working in this has also, I would say the vast majority of us, probably 98%, have experienced profound grief or trauma.
I do believe that's true.
Almost every person I encounter has some crazy life experience that they've gone through prior to this that I think has placed in us that desire to help, right? Because we have been helped. I'm blessed to be a blessing. That's what I say. Because I was helped, I can stand today and help somebody who can stand tomorrow and help somebody.
And it's not going to be a like for like help.
No,
I mean, it's
no. It's just, again, you know, just remembering. Like, I remember when people remember the names of the babies that we lost. That means so much to me, because that makes it real. That brings it into the present, that this was a thing. It was an acknowledgement of what happened.
It's almost like your struggle's not lost.
Right.
It's actively making a difference.
Yeah. And it means something, and it reminds me that I'm not alone, and that my babies are remembered, right? So like, that's the biggest thing that, as the nobodies, we've wanted to do, is just, if we can just help people remember they're not alone. Okay. I think that's vital.
So now let's do to larger organizations, smaller organizations, and churches, anybody that's doing anything, the one-off guys.
Yeah.
Like, what do you want them to do? Like, you're seeing it now, so it's 5 months later.
Yeah.
I mean, is it something they need to keep pushing, or?
Yeah, I mean, it's going to take us, if we're ever made whole in this area, or, you know, which, I mean, we never will be. We're always going to have traces of this, you know. But I think recognizing it is a marathon, not a sprint.
Yeah.
Please don't leave. Please don't stop until we're in a better place, you know, because here we sit 5 months later, and we know very specifically, you know, families and individuals that, you know, promises have been made that just logistically they can't deliver on yet, right? Like, I think everybody is afraid. A lot of people who've been involved in the storm and who've been, you know, a victim of it, they're afraid that, like, these promises have been made and then you don't hear from these people for a while. Well, they can't call you and follow up with you every single day, you know, but, like, I think there's just this fear that people are going to pull out too soon, and that things are going to be left undone, you know. So I guess that's the thing, is please just stay, you know, please just keep going. There's times that it feels very fulfilling. Yeah. There's times where it kind of feels like a little bit of a drought, right? Like, we've, you know, as the nobodies, we've kind of been in a little bit of a slow spot, you know, the last month or so. Part of it was the holidays. Everybody kind of pulled back and buckled down, and then it's kind of like, okay, well, how do we get this up and rolling again?
Well, things are transitioning too.
Yeah,
from hub
and
to building.
With every transition, there's been a slow period, right? Yeah. There's a little bit of lag. And I think all of us started running like our heads were on fire in the beginning. And so then that was almost like a little bit of a come down when it slowed down a little bit. Yeah. You're like, oh my gosh, well, I remember the first day that my phone didn't ring off the hook, and I thought, is everybody okay? Right. You know, it's unnerving. But just, I guess for us, we committed to the long haul, right? And that doesn't look the same every day. That doesn't look the same every week. There's weeks that we talk and check in, and we've got, you know, obviously some people that we are kind of trying to help sustain, and some projects where we like to think of ourselves as kind of like a linchpin, right? Yeah. So, like, this organization over here needs this. If they can call us, then we have our list of people and our whatever. So kind of like linking up organizations, right? It's the networking.
It's knowing the business back.
Right. And part of that was because in the beginning we had no money, and we didn't know how we wanted to organize ourselves. We didn't know if we wanted to actually become a charity or a 501c3 or anything at all, if we wanted to just operate. And then we started getting afraid because businesses and taxes and money, right? So then we started with the gift cards, because it was pretty easy. It
is kind of like a challenge.
Yeah, it is. It's a lot to think about, you know, because you do also have to be, you know, you want to help everybody, but you have to be a good steward of what you've got, you know. So that's the thing. Like, I don't want to be audited. You know, like I can account for every dollar, but we weren't sure how we wanted to proceed with that. So in the interim, we kind of tried to figure out ways to continue to help.
That's the stuff nobody sees.
No, that's the clerical stuff that's really boring. You know, like. It's not glamorous. It's not exciting. You can't really make a Facebook page about the day you sat down or a post about the day you sat down.
Balance your checkbook.
Right. Yeah. It's not that fun. But it's a very real thing, right? Yeah. Especially to be sustainable, to be able to keep it going long term. So, like, we've all had to organize more formally.
Now we've got people that have kind of now, like, so what I'm seeing now is we're seeing like these groups from out of state that are very well organized.
Yes.
This is what they do.
Yeah.
So, like, there's a house that we're kind of working with and supplying construction material to, but this organization come in from Pennsylvania, and they're super organized.
Yeah.
They come in like 4 weeks ago, done takeoff lists, knew everything. they're going to have a house rebuilt in 2 weeks.
It's amazing.
Like, they come in, they're ready to go.
Crazy.
They start, they're done.
Yeah.
Like, we need more of those organizations.
Yeah.
I do think Tennessee is a little bit more leaps and bounds, honestly, above. And I do think that has everything to do, and I'm just going to say, it's got everything to do with the community.
I think so too.
It has nothing to do with larger governmental.
No, not at all. It's the local people that mobilized.
Yeah. And so I do think that we need more of those. So, like, if you're a church, if you are an organization, if you're anything that you have the ability to maybe take on one singular task, I would love to see more of
Absolutely.
those.
Like we've talked about before, like pick your lane.
Yeah.
You know, and you know, you and I've used that phrase a lot in our talks back and forth over the last couple of months, but it's so true. So it's like trying to get, and I remember in the beginning when we all kind of had to start thinking like that, you know, where you feel like, okay, so we've changed and we've helped a lot of people today, right? Yeah. Like we've sent out all of this stuff that's gone to multiple households and multiple families, right? And then it kind of feels like a little bit of a, I don't want to say like a letdown, but it's hard to think about serving the many versus serving the one completely, right? But I think we are in that phase where it's like, okay, let's pick a house, let's pick a family or a street even, or whatever, and see it through to the end. And then, I don't know, you know, trying to figure out how to organize, and we're thinking that this may be something that we can do as the nobodies, but trying to organize, like you and I've talked about before too, like youth groups and mission trips and things like that, and how to plug these people in and take advantage of the people that want to give generously with their time and their resources when they come to this area, but we've got to have them well situated when they get here to make the most impact.
Well, I've been telling people too, we're kind of over the cheap phase.
Yeah.
That's kind
of, it's the now best it's expensive and it's slow.
It's expensive, but it's also skilled.
Yes.
Like it's
because you want it done right.
Cheap and unskilled to tear out flooring in a house.
Right. Anybody can muck out, but to put it back is the hard part.
Yeah. So
when we talked about that in the beginning, like we can't just go in and just be ripping these people's houses to shreds
too. And like you got, I wish it wasn't, but there's zoning, there's code, there's all these other things too that people are having to kind of like know.
Well, and like we talked about too, like to make this an area where economically our region is not handicapped by this for the next 50 years, right? Like we don't want to be a place where people are afraid to buy a house because it's been through a flood, right? Like we want to be a place that's known as, no, they rebuilt all of these things
in the same spots,
in the same spots, but it is to spec. Code is great. It's on the up and up. It's not some weird cobbled together, grandfathered in situation. You know, like, no, it's done right.
It is funny to have to think about those things.
Yeah.
I mean, really.
Yeah, I mean, because there's houses that have been vacant and still stand in water, from what I hear in places in New Orleans that, you know, we don't want that for our region.
No.
And so thinking long term,
stronger.
Yeah,
I mean, we really are.
Well, I think so too. I mean, you know, we've definitely seen it where it's like, okay, the ASP house that's going back there is
it's nice.
So much better than what was there.
It's new.
Right?
I mean, it's nice,
it's new and it's stick built and it's, you know, it's a good thing. So I think that definitely, but I think that's where people, and then too, that determination between what needs to be torn down and rebuilt versus what can be fixed, and talking about being a good steward of resources and that allocation of labor and effort and funds and
knowledge. Like what I would challenge some people too, and I've really tried to push this out there, is if you're retired, you can't move, you're laid up in a truck.
We can find something for you to do.
I mean, I would much rather you sit in your truck and you drive around and tell these organizations that churches, how to do things. Like there's reasons you have a knowledge.
Yeah.
God's done that on purpose.
Right.
Let's figure out how to utilize that.
Right.
You know, and so I do think that as we move forward, that stuff's going to be, it's really what's needed.
Yeah. Well, and I think realizing too, in that same vein, that everyone has a way that they can give.
Yeah.
Right. So Maddie, my business partner, and I were having a conversation one day in the middle of this, and I said, thank you so much for just keeping things rolling. You know, like I'm so sorry. I've kind of been MIA. And she said, no, I wish I could do more. And I'm like, no, you are doing the most for me because you're keeping this going. So that I can, and I said, you know, and I'm not lighting the world on fire. You know, we're shelling ramen noodles right now. You know, like, but it's important work in that moment. But if I didn't have people that were willing to come and support that effort, then I couldn't do that, right? So everybody plays their part.
And I do think
everybody's got something to offer.
It was funny, like we went through this really huge push, like people got behind us. And like they were pushing, like not just us, I'm talking about the community.
Yeah.
There was this huge thing about like 4 months. It was like everybody turned on each other, started biting each other's ankles. It was unreal.
Yeah.
So I do think like that mental tear, like it eventually got to people.
I started saying around Thanksgiving, like everybody needs to go home and take a nap.
Yeah. Like, I mean, it's bad. It's hard.
It's so hard. But like everybody is not, for the most part, the dire needs are met. Yeah. We all need to step back, rest, recover. You can't pour from an empty cup.
Yeah.
And come back to it with fresh eyes, right?
I would hope that out of all this, though, is you've got all these groups. Like I saw it in the very beginning. There was local churches, that was throwing like tent revivals or revivals, and they were, I can't remember, 7 or 8 saved at one tent revival, baptized there in a horse trough,
Yeah.
Like, could you imagine now? Like, you've got all these people out of state.
Yeah.
We've got an opportunity that's unlike anything that's ever been put in front of us before.
Absolutely.
And so I would really challenge a lot of these local churches, local organizations you don't have to know how to do it.
No.
Just figure out a way to connect and get into it, and because you can make a change. Now, like we're talking, and I think what is the opportunity for me is where we have people from Indiana, Oregon, Washington State.
Yep.
We've had Canada people come work in the warehouse from Canada just because.
Yeah.
They were on vacation in Sevierville and they said, hey, we want to serve, and they come over here and work in the warehouse for a day.
That's so cool.
Like it was awesome, but we're touching the whole country.
Yeah.
By a disaster happening.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like when you take a step back and you realize what is actually going on, we're wanting to rebuild a house, but we could rebuild the country.
Well, and I think that's the thing too, and I think that's from volunteers that have come from out of state that aren't as familiar with our area. They've been blown away by the humility and the generosity of the people who have been impacted, right? Like of saying, no, I'm good, but Miss So-and-so up here needs blah, blah, blah. Like they're not worried about themselves, right? But I think that I've said a million times, now is not the time to be Appalachian. I need you to tell me what you need. Yeah. I cannot help you if you don't tell me what you need. And things, like we've said, the stuff is in abundance. I just need to know what to get you.
Yeah. We've joked. We said we sometimes want to leave the warehouse doors open.
Yeah, just see who needs. Just let people come and get because that don't want to ask.
Everybody's got it, and nobody. But the same thing is like, do we still need buddy heaters, or do we need plywood, or do we need OSB? And so that's kind of the balancing act.
And it's been a really cool thing too. And I'm sure you guys, especially sending stuff on to Kentucky, but to see how all of our little pop-up organizations, now that this flooding has happened in Virginia and Kentucky, springing into action for that too, right? So it's like, we're not done here, but we can still help over here.
It is kind of funny.
And like you and I talked about in the beginning, like the organization that you were able to work with in the beginning and how they kind of helped, and like if we can see one, do one, teach one.
That's what I'm saying is like if we can be that. But what was funny is at the very beginning, even these larger organizations were calling these small ones.
Yeah.
They called them rogue organizations, or rogue groups, right?
Yeah.
2 people out here gutting a house. They like these larger ones kind of looked somewhat
like,
down, like really like let's let us handle it. I'm like, if those 2 people,
if they're doing a good job,
didn't gut that house, like let's support them. Let's give them everything they need.
Exactly. And I think that's the thing that I would also like to say to the larger organizations in the churches is don't count out the little guys.
Yeah.
Right? Because like I look at what you guys have done and how God's blessing this organization and like the good that's going to come out of this for years to come. And it's such a testament to just being willing, right? Being willing to serve and open up and let the Lord lead to wherever it is that you need to be. But I've talked with our friends over in North Carolina about ASP, and I'm like, the ASP connection is so great. I said, because they're really focused, I feel like, on helping the area as a whole, and they don't want to or need to do it all themselves, right? Like they are reaching out to some of these little rogue organizations, right? Like if we're all working towards the same thing.
If the goal's the same.
If the goal's the same, we can all work together. It's not going to distract from any credibility or any, so I think that's the thing too, is like, don't underestimate the little one-offs that have sprung up. Because, we might be small, but we're getting some stuff done, especially considering 6 months ago, we weren't doing any of this. It's pretty amazing.
You were cutting hair.
Yeah, I was cutting hair. Like the day of the storm, my biggest thing was, well, man, we have to reschedule some people.
Yeah.
I wonder if we've got power at the shop. And then everything was different. But it's just that collective effort, right? That like we can all work together. Don't be afraid. It's not a me against you. It's not at my organization.
It's an us. It's unity.
It's an us.
It's unification.
Yeah. And so I've been really impressed with a lot of, like I said, ASP, United Way, reaching out and want to connect people and, make things happen.
I think it's kind of funny too, is like, to kind of draw this in, is one thing that I've not done one single time. I've not asked what religion you are. I've not asked what political affiliations you are. Nope. I've not asked what you think about. None of that's mattered.
Nope.
What's mattered is somebody's called the office or called our cell phone or called something and said, hey, what we want is to come in for 2 or 3 days. Do you have a place for us to stay, and what can we do?
Yeah.
I mean, like, that's the only thing they care about.
Right.
Right. And so I think for me, that's the beautiful thing. And to kind of close it all out, I'm going to ask you to do something.
Okay.
But to close it all out is that basically the reason we're doing this and sitting down is that nobody's can actually do something.
Yeah.
Like, if you just think that you're unqualified, none of the disciples were qualified, right?
No.
Like, you don't have to be ex-military and know how to to bandage somebody in the field.
Right.
I mean, you don't need to know that.
No.
You were cutting hair.
Right.
And now you're doing disaster recovery.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, you're helping communities. So what I would like to do, if you're okay with it, is maybe you pray us out.
Yeah.
And just like close us out in that manner, if that's okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Dear Heavenly Father, thank you so much for this wonderful opportunity, God, to sit here today and recount what we've been going through the last couple of months and how we've seen your hand work in our lives, God. And help us to always remember that even in the taking, you are good and you do have a plan for us and for our lives. And even bad things, can work together for the good of those who love and serve you, Lord. And we would just ask that you continue to keep all of us humble and united in the ways that we move, in the conversations that we have, in the people that we meet. Help us to point them back to you, God, not at ourselves, not at our organizations, but back to you, God. Help us to continue to be your hands and feet and do mighty things in your name, Jesus. And we just appreciate the fellowship and the kinship that we've all found in doing this, and the new friendships and relationships that we've made. God, and just please continue to bless our region. Protect all of us. Put your hand on this area. And let us know that we are a light and we can be an example for what this world should be today, God. Yes. We ask all these things in your name. Amen.
Amen. Amen.